So in our final installment here of understanding the mortgage market and the market chain and price discovery, we're going to just look here for a few minutes here about some potential solutions. Because I think there are some things, if we understand the chain of the market and the demand-pull situation, that can be done that would facilitate future enhancements and keep such a thing from happening again. The first thing that I want to start with, and let's look at from the side of the mortgage originators, and especially even when mortgages are made. I think very basically there probably ought to be some sort of rule that says a homeowner who's applying for a mortgage needs to have some sort of interest in the mortgage. So we should probably do away with mortgages where the customer doesn't have any interest in the house, that he doesn't have any equity going in. And for years and years, the basic rule was that the customer had to put 20% down in order to get into a mortgage. And those rules were laxed in order to allow to qualify more people. But at some point, and especially recently, when less and less money was needed to be put down because the rest could ride on the equity of the house as houses were increasing in value, really allowed people to leverage with a large value asset on a very little down payment, if any. And so I think probably as a basic rule, somewhere in the neighborhood of requiring a customer who's getting a mortgage, a house mortgage, to have at least 10% down would be sound, at least, of their own money that they put into the pot in order to get into this house, so that they have an incentive and a root system, if you will, in the financial obligation. The other thing, and then when you talk about going from there to the actual originate and sell model of the banks, I think this is important for the banks to be able to originate and sell. It does facilitate mortgage making. But we probably ought to think about something where the bank automatically will hold what they sell. At least a small portion of it, maybe 15 to 20% of what they sell in the secondary market, they have to hold of like kind. So if I'm selling 80% of prime paper to the secondary market and 15% of Alt-A and 5% of subprime, I have to keep the same mix on my books. I have to keep 15 to 20% of that that paper that I would sell to the secondary market internal. So that I also have a vested interest, that I'm not going to just become a subprime mortgage machine. And then when it comes to the rating agencies, I think one of the solutions is getting rid of vested interest. So the way rating agencies are paid probably needs to be looked at, so that when they rate things, they can rate things objectively from a third-party perspective. And they've done that for years. I think, again, going back to my prior comments in the last session, was that there's two things that played against the rating agencies: the pure volume that came through, and then also the complexity. Rating agencies are a vital third-party player in it, and we need to keep them sound. As far as the next section, the actual GSE section, buying and investment banks buying the secondary market paper, I think, again, we have to apply the same logic we're going to apply to the banks, that they need to be able to be willing to hold in like kind 15 to 20% of what they're willing to sell in the next market. You notice I'm not saying kill the market for even complex financial instruments. I think they're all important. I'm saying let's improve the market and price discovery. But I think if you make those who would repackage and sell these assets hold a like kind, it would influence how they go about their business considerably. The other thing I think we need to reform is the idea of using government-sponsored entities in any way. And if we do, we've got to be very careful of how we use them, that we don't force forward people's decisions to move in homes when they're just not ready. We're really hurting people. We're not helping people by doing that. If we really care about people who are of lower income, we would want them to be ready and good to go to be able to meet their financial obligations, so that it might go well with them, instead of force forwarding a decision and giving them incentive to buy a house when they're not quite ready, and in the end doing them damage. So I think policies should not be enforced on the government-sponsored agencies, social policies that would force lower income people into homes or incentivize them to get homes when they're not quite ready. Again, when it comes to the more complex issues, this is a little different twist. When it comes to more complex issues of rating, the complex financial instruments, the SIVs, I'm putting forward an idea that the Fed itself would have a rating wing that's purely a third-party outfit under the Fed, a whole new wing, a financial analyst that would have to get, that the rating agencies and the people who would resell these to investors would have to get kind of a check mark next to those assets from the Fed rating agency. And that would also allow the Fed to have a system of pedals and brakes on the entire market, because the Fed then could say, nope, you're putting too much through here, hold on. We're not able to rate it as quickly as you want us to, so let's just hold on here. I want to rate this properly. Plus, as the Fed, I don't have an invested interest. So I think this would be a healthy thing, to use a wing of the Fed, to create a wing of the Fed that would actually rate the more complex issues. And also then that would lead right into the investor piece, that when they're buying mortgage-backed SIVs, CDOs, that they would have to write into, or they would want to write into their requirements and agreements that they would only buy this type of paper that would actually had been Fed rated. If it had been Fed rated, there would probably be a much greater assuredness from investors that this has actually gone through a third party and doesn't have any vested interest, and someone's actually who understands it would more thoroughly be able to price it. So I think if we made these suggestions, if we made sure that homeowners had an equity stake in their mortgage of at least 10%, that banks would have to hold in like kind certain mortgages that would resell, that would remove the vested interest in the rating agencies in some measure, figure out a way to do that, that the GSE problem would need to go away, where the government, and we wouldn't use the GSEs as any more than a market maker. We wouldn't use them for social engineering. And then to sell only what they would only, and brokers would only be able to sell what they would be willing to hold as well, just like banks and like kind. And then creating this Fed rating agency to be the brakes and pedals for the overall market, especially for the complex financial instruments. And then finally, ensure that the investors would, we really didn't need to incentivize investors too much to do this, because they'd want to buy the paper that was Fed rated, I would think, for more surety on the rating. So this is kind of a solution set, at least one solution set, not necessarily perfect, but one way to look at it, that comes out of understanding the mortgage market chain. And hopefully this hour or so of lectures on this has helped you understand a little more of the complexity of the market. The plan is to do a little more in depth as far as how did we get where we are now in October, November timeframe of 2008 as far as an economy, and how this can affect the economy, and some of the things that really do need to be done from a putting out the fire perspective, especially with housing prices, etc. But I think until this is dealt with well, we have the curious ability to repeat history if we don't understand it correctly. Much like if you don't understand what's going wrong with the patient, you probably shouldn't start doing certain things to the patient. So the first thing is to having a more thorough understanding of what's going on in order to prescribe the things at the specific points that might make sense to create viable solutions.